Hi. Okay, so yeah, we're here with episode number 2 of I Am IMA. Today, I'm joined very kindly by Kieren Hollingsworth, who is one of the theme leads for the IMA theme. Hi, Kieren. How are you doing?
Hi there. I'm fine. I'm great. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for asking. I don't know if we picked an excellent opportunity to record this just as there's a helicopter landing outside my window. So apologies to listeners who do hear a bit of background noise. Maybe we can tinker that away. But yes, this is the downside to having an office so close to the RVI helipad. We occasionally get to see them fly in and out. So yeah, we'll crack on regardless. So yeah, as I said, thank you very much for joining me today. Basically, the podcast, we're just going to break down a little bit of how you got to where you are and how you feel the IMA is going to improve where we are and how we're going to get as much out of it as possible. But if you don't mind, I'd like to start kind of in the way back machine and go right back to kind of undergraduate level. So you had a very different. Well, you're the only non-biologist I've spoken to so far. I would say non-biologist. How would you classify yourself? Would you classify yourself as a chemist or as a physicist, or I know medical physicist has come up in my reading as well?
Well, it's a very good question, because one of the things about my education and career pathway is it appears to have looped around in some circles. Right. So when I set off on my undergraduate career, I was fully intending to be a fully paid up physicist of the atom smashing, perhaps radio astronomy ilk.
Excellent.
I very quickly discovered that I wasn't very motivated by the abstractions of really hardcore pure physics.
Right.
I was actually more interested in applied physics and engineering.
Okay.
And luckily, because of the course I was doing, it actually became quite a relatively straightforward matter to actually move across from concentrating on physics and chemistry to actually moving towards engineering.
Okay.
And
where was that? Where were you based for your undergrad?
So I started doing natural sciences at Cambridge.
Okay.
That was the idea. The idea was to go down a pure physics track. But because it's a very modular course, you can actually hear in all sorts of directions from it.
Yeah.
And it's very easy. It's very easy and in fact intrinsically designed to be able to transfer to engineering if you wish to do so.
Yes. Yeah. I think because that's also true that the Nat Sci courses, I know there's a few Nat Sci courses popped up after that one was founded, with that same idea in that you have a broader year one and then you can dive down routes of interest in years further. At least it makes it easier for you to do that.
And I think it's a great idea, because actually I did, as a sideline, I did biology of cells, which was full of genetics and cell biology. And at the time I thought this is just going to be a passing interest for now. Yeah. But and actually I found it really hard because I hadn't done A-level biology. But I'm glad I did it, because it's actually helped me to understand a lot of the collaborative work that I've done since and most recently. So at the time I thought it was a passing fad, but it actually turned out to be of lasting view and interest.
Excellent.
I think it's a great idea if people can mix sciences together in their learning. I think we're too quick often to say he's a physicist, he's a chemist, he's a biologist.
Absolutely. I think it's the more strings you've got to your bow, the easier it is to understand when people come to you with those kind of wacky, weird problems out of left field. It makes you a little bit more appreciative of other people as well. Okay, so Cambridge for your undergraduate as well, and then I think from my notes you've got a very thorough bio on the Newcastle University webpage, which I'm very thankful for. So I've been reading through that. So it's straight from there, and then did a PhD at Cambridge as well. An award-winning PhD thesis.
An award-winning PhD thesis, yes. Danckwert's Pergammon Prize, and that was actually, it was still in engineering, so it was actually in chemical engineering, but it was actually using NMR to look at structured fluids. And by that, I mean things are either two-phase fluids in some way, or they're emulsions or suspensions.
Okay.
So it was using very high field narrow bore scanners to do things like probe the dimensions of droplet sizes or phase sizes, look at their rheology. So it was quite a fun mix of chemical engineering, but also starting to learn about nuclear magnetic resonance,
right,
and spectrometers. And I think the upshot of that was that I'd gone in thinking I was interested in the chemical engineering bit of it, and the physics bit was the sideline. But actually, when I emerged from the end of it, I really discovered that it was the NMR physics that I was interested in, and it was the fluids that was the sideline, and it was
right.
NMR that I was interested in doing more of.
Yes, I think that's something that maybe not a lot of people get told before they start a PhD, is that I think it's probably true to say that what you start doing on your PhD is not what you necessarily end up doing at the end of your PhD. And if some genius PI has already thought out 3 years ahead and it all goes exactly to plan, I haven't met that PhD student yet, but if it's possible, you have to have that ability to kind of adapt and change your focus a little bit, and kind of, it's almost part of what being a PhD student is, I think, is learning to do that, because so much of that happens in day-to-day science. If you carry on in research, it's not necessarily, yes, answering the question you want to answer, but if you find something interesting along the way, you've got to have to learn to chase that down as well.
I think that's absolutely right. And I was very lucky because I was an EPSRC quota student, as it then was, and there were very few. We had a research plan going in with my supervisor, but there were very few constraints, and you could, I was at liberty to kind of drive things where I wanted to drive them, and there was a lot of there was a great interaction in that lab between PhD students and the postdocs and the technical staff, and it was a big asset to those actual interactions between different groups of people with different interests and skills was crucial, because it really encouraged you and it motivated you, and it drove you forward to do things that you couldn't have considered doing by yourself. Yeah, and I think that was a really big learning from that lab. It was an amazing experience to have. And as you say, where you emerge from the end of that 3 years is not where you thought you were.
No, definitely not. And so when you did a couple of postdocs at Cambridge as well, following that PhD, is that right? Or did you postdoc somewhere else?
So no, there was one postdoc at Cambridge, and that was really the big shift in direction. Because as I say, when I got to the end of my PhD, I thought, yeah, really interested in the NMR, the fluids. I've had my time with the fluids.
Less so the fluids, more the NMR. Okay.
Time to move on. And I thought, I really want to get into the medical biological side of this.
Right.
So there was advertised at the time a postdoc that was looking at diffuse liver disease down at Adam Brooks Hospital.
Okay.
And it turned out that the techniques that they wanted to use, the MRI techniques, actually had a big overlap with what I had done in my PhD.
Okay.
So it was a piece of, you could call it just a piece of dumb luck or divine guidance, but there was just this alignment of methods between what I'd done and what was wanted. I thought, great, here's a chance to go for it. And it was a real culture shock, actually, because it was moving from, a very free environment, which is a pure research environment, moving right into the middle of a radiology department in a hospital. They had a lot
for a pure scientist. That must have been a culture shock.
It was amazing, and it began, just learning how about how clinical governance would work around your research, and obviously the standards that we had to keep to in kind of restoring the scanners to the same state as they were at the end of every session. Previously we've been able to leave them in bits if we'd wanted to overnight or over the weekend, but that's not on anymore. You have to account for everything that you're doing to this device, and the whole scale of the thing is very different. Same physical principles, but just a very different approach. And whilst I was doing that, I casually did one of my projects was actually to look at changes in liver fat during a particular diet that was going on. And it's really strange because despite the many things I've done in my career, there's been this particular theme of the liver and diet has kept ringing back.
Right. Okay.
Regular intervals throughout it.
So you kind of backed your way into being a liver specialist, but never intending to set out that way. Is that fair to say, or would you?
No, and indeed, again, you know, at Addenbrooke's there was the opportunity to get involved in a wide range of research. I was looking at liver fibrosis research. I was looking for non-invasive markers of liver fibrosis, but I got involved in many things. We got involved in research about bladder cancer and cervical cancer, setting up methods for looking at the effects of radiotherapy on those. Got involved in salivary gland research.
Wow. Okay.
It was quite a feast of things that I was exposed to, and I just kept learning different things while I was there.
I think that's yeah, that's amazing. That's quite a massive variety of different things. But I mean, that's one of the, I can certainly sympathise with that. I mean, one of the benefits of being kind of developing expertise in one specific technique or field of techniques means that you are readily able to adapt to the different questions coming in and be able to tune your techniques to answering it, or help the researcher or the physician, the MD, to answer those questions using your technique, and you can build a wide variety of things. That's really really interesting. So following that, so how big a gap between doing the Addenbrooke's research to moving up to Newcastle? What was it that prompted the move to the far north?
So curiously, it was a scanner that was installed at Addenbrooke's that didn't quite go to plan. So they got their first 3T scanner at Addenbrooke's, which was very new at the time, the idea of having this higher field strength, and there were lots of teething problems with it, and unfortunately it cut down on our research time, and that kind of got me to think. It slowed my research project quite a lot, although I was enjoying it, and it set me to thinking, oh goodness, what will happen, you know, if this continues. And then at that time, I think I'd met Roy Taylor, who is a professor of medicine and metabolism, at a meeting in Oxford. And then I happened to see, subsequently to that, an advert for a position in a new magnetic resonance centre that was being founded at Newcastle.
Oh, right.
With a research dedicated scanner. So it was almost the opposition of these two things. You know, there were difficulties in scanner access when you were working on an NHS scanner, and then here was the offer of a research dedicated MRI scanner in a research dedicated centre. And I am from the north of England, so I'm from Harrogate, North Yorkshire.
Okay, great.
So there was seeing Newcastle. I had lived in Newcastle for a summer previously to that, and there was a big temptation to return, because I'd been there. I knew I liked it. I knew it was a friendly place, and so it was quite a draw. So,
yeah, definitely. It's almost like the draw of unlimited access to a scanner you could use to your heart's content without fighting over. It must have been a no-brainer to move up here. Okay, that's great. And so that's interesting. So it's almost like, from reading I'll be honest, from reading your bio online, it reads like very much like your standard academic, like if you just look at the titles, it's very much like a standard academic pathway. As in, you know, did a degree, did a PhD and postdocs, and he came up here and went to work at another university. But learning about details of it doesn't sound like your standard academic career pathway at all. Because what it feels like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but going down the route of being an expert in an actual instrument, or not just one instrument, but a field of instruments, the NMR, for example, in your case, it kind of leads you into, yes, you did do an academic PhD to start with, and you did do some postdocs following that, but those postdocs you weren't stuck in a lab the whole time. You were in a hospital at one point. You were doing other things. You were branching out to study lots of different diseases, not just one subprotein of one subdisease, and wholly focused on that for a small group or something like that. So when you moved up to Newcastle, your expectations were to shift straight back into being a full researcher, or did you have any expectations of having to do teaching? Because I think if we were to flash forward to now, obviously you've got more teaching on your plate. You have to do, I know we all have to play multiple roles. We have lots of different hats on these days, but how did you see it when you moved up to Newcastle? What was promised of you? Were you anticipating a lot of teaching and that sort of thing, or not so much?
So no, there was no teaching to start with.
Okay.
So when I moved up into a research associate role that was described as being a core research associate within the centre, and there was no teaching element to that at all. So essentially, I was dedicated to putting, designing, implementing, working with clinical collaborators to, establish techniques that will be used in clinical research.
Right. Okay.
And when I started, there were essentially two themes which overlapped. So there was an MRC project in primary biliary cirrhosis, which was being led by Julia Newton and Dave Jones.
Okay.
And it was looking at the effects of that liver disease on very diverse organs. So we had a sub-study which looked at the effect on the brain and whether certain metals were being deposited in certain parts of the brain, causing fatigue. Then there was a bit which looked at whether we could detect the metabolic effects of fatigue using phosphorus spectroscopy in the leg muscle, so looking directly at ATP and phosphocreatine and things like that.
Wow.
And then there was another part which looked at those energetic molecules, but in the heart. So you can actually use MR to look at the energy molecules in the heart, look at the heart's metabolic status in real time. And so that project was just so diverse. So on the one hand, I had to get acquainted with, set up and validate protocols for the brain. And then differently, I had to go and work out how to do challenge studies for the leg muscle. And then at the same time, I had to work out how to do the phosphorus energetics of the human heart, which is, it's a very subject,
all coming from somebody who did one cell biology degree, one cell biology module back in year one, and never thought I'd touch it again. That's exactly. Quite a big step away from that. Massive change from that. Wow. Okay. So lots of different challenges, lots of different bits of people coming in at all different times and having to look at them in different ways. Oh wow. So from there, where did you go from there? Was that a logical step to take another role at the same center, or was it a case of moving into doing more teaching and doing? Because I think your role now is you're a senior lecturer. Is that correct, or have I got that completely wrong?
Well. Most recently, right now, I'm a reader.
Sorry, my apologies.
Recently. No, but I mean, in that first step, that was purely research. And what tended to happen then was, in the first sort of 2 to 3 years, I concentrated mostly on that project.
Yeah.
But then the techniques from that project turned out to be useful to address other clinical questions. So what we got across the next 2 to 3 years was really a proliferation of research based around those questions.
Right.
So once you go and tell people, well, we can detect impairments in cardiac energetics in this condition, people will then say to you, well, would that not be interesting if we did this? And again, with the phosphorus exercise, each technique that you would build up would then spawn its own, subsequent research. There was a parallel track in which I was looking at composition. So again, the liver fat came back yet again when Roy Taylor started doing his studies on very low calorie diets in diabetes. And so we started looking at liver fat changes. We then worked on the harder question of looking at how the pancreas fat and the pancreas morphology was actually changing. And it was a massively exciting and busy time, because it was like a nuclear reaction. Right. So everything that you would establish and work on and write the paper, then someone would see, and then they would come and talk to you again about what can we do in this condition. All the work we did about liver fat then proliferated across into the neuromuscular diseases, where people want to know, how is the fat replacement of skeletal muscle happening?
There's a massive centre for that in Newcastle. I'm sure people know, but the neuromuscular dystrophy team here is very successful and very prolific, and they've been working on it for a super long time. They've got a lot of high power work coming out. So yeah, I can sympathise with that. Again, I could just imagine you figuring out exactly how to do something, and then all those other academics, that little light pops on in their brains as well, and thinking, well, if they can do it for X, why can't they do it for my disease or my area of interest? And then you modify it for them, and you get more power to it that way. Oh wow, so that's amazing. And then so how do you get from there to where you are now? Because obviously that pure research doesn't last forever. I mean, you've had to take on now. You've got undergraduate students, master's students. You've had students aplenty over the years, and if we're being completely, I think we've just come out of a tutorial distance at the moment. Was that right? How did that go today? Was that okay?
That's right. So that was a tutorial for the medical physicists who are going to join the NHS to run their medical equipment, and that very enjoyable. I mean, they have a professional course that's extremely intense. They've got a 6-week course. They get a week and a half of MRI. So we've diluted down the very essentials of the subject that they have to know, and we deliver it to them really within 2 days worth of material. So they've got to go from zero to hero in MRI in 2 days, and then they've got to do the same with ultrasound and CT and everything else. So it's quite a tough ask. So it's a really concentrated course, but I enjoy teaching that a lot, actually. And that's been one of the nice evolutions, is that as time went on, more pieces started to come in terms of teaching the medical physicists, and nowadays teaching radiologists as well. I think thinking about the transition of how the career developed, though, was about 4 to 5 years in to being at Newcastle. I then started to look at applying for my own monies and my own grants.
Sure. Yeah. And
the topic that I landed on, and it was really prompted by observing what was happening in my own research, which was that there were lots of interesting questions you could address with MR, but the fundamental problem of them was that MRI takes minutes. It's not like an X-ray or a CT scan. If you're going to have one of those, it'll take them longer to set you up to have the scan than it will to do the scan.
Right.
By the time the scan actually happens, you'll think, oh my goodness, was that it?
Yeah.
But with MRI, it goes on for minutes and minutes of clattering and banging. And essentially, it's because the signals that we're looking at in MR are actually very weak. Right. So on the one hand, that's the reason why MR is very safe, because the energies involved are quite low. The flip side of that equation is that it actually takes you many minutes to build up enough of those signals to actually read out an image.
I see.
And I'd seen some theoretical work which had been done, which suggested, well, the same kind of compression technology that we use for doing JPEGs from images could be incorporated into the image reconstruction technique. So when you collect an MR image, it's not like knitting a jumper. So you don't acquire the image line by line.
Sure. No, right. Okay.
You see a brain emerging. What you actually acquire is data that is a Fourier transform of that. So, and then the MR image is actually the frequency space of that data.
All right. Wow. I'll be totally honest. I am not a physicist. I mean, that's all kind of a bit of a black box. Well, a grey box most of the time, right? But yeah, that's fascinating. So how do they apply that compression to improve does that just improve the speed of how quickly you can get that image back and into a readable format, or did that theoretical research actually get applied, or was that just a stepping stone in?
Well, this was the question, because the theoretical research was there and people were there and they were saying, well, let's take this data, let's throw some of this data away and let's see if we can come up with clever means to actually reconstruct it. Right. Now, this was all very well, but actually to be able to gain from doing this, you actually have to be able to do this prospectively. So you actually have to be able to reprogram your scanner to make it collect less data in the right pattern, and the pattern that you collect is a special pattern that you have to optimize, and then you have to demonstrate when you reconstruct that you actually have equivalent information as you would have if you'd done the whole scan.
Right.
So in theory, the idea of this is that you collect in 1 minute what you would collect in 5 minutes.
Sure.
But the problem at the time that I first discovered it was that everybody was talking the theory of doing and not the practice.
Right.
And really what I saw the opportunity for was to get in there and kind of say, all right, well, look, let's define some situations in which this will be really valuable, and let's optimize it, and let's prove that it works.
Right.
And so I selected 2 situations that I was very familiar with, which were examining the fat replacement in the dystrophic muscle, so in neuromuscular diseases, and in looking at liver fat in people with type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And so I took those 2 cases and I said, right, okay, if we're actually going to do this, if we're actually going to acquire in 1 minute rather than 5, what do these sampling patterns need to look like?
Sure.
And so we worked out what the pattern would need to look like. We worked out how to play it out on the scanner, and then we worked out how to reconstruct it. And then we had to, if we compare the quality of what we've now got with what we would have had if we'd spent 5 minutes doing it, is it sufficient? Can we put bounds on it so that we can say the quality of the answer that you are going to get for this application is acceptable?
Yeah.
And that is the nub of the MRC grant that I did, to prove that we could do it, that it was acceptable, and that it could actually practically be done.
Sure.
And what was nice about that is it took me away from the core role to some degree. So my position was backfilled by someone else, and I got to spend that 3-year chunk really looking at, concentrating on that project and working up that project. And at the time it was lovely that we got 3 really excellent papers, really high impact papers out of it. But what was nicer was that then actually proliferated into using it in research. So literally last week we have a paper out about tracking muscle changes in children who are having testosterone supplementation, and we have used that acceleration technology to do it. Next year we're going to do a trial in rheumatoid arthritis, and again we're going to use the acceleration to do it. So what is nice is that, better than it was nice enough to do that work and produce the papers, but what's nice is now actually getting to use it for what I wanted to use it for when definitely. I began.
Definitely, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's amazing. That's a really amazing story. It's kind of opened your mind up a little bit to the possibilities of things that can happen if you do have to keep reading, you do have to keep looking around and trying new things out. But there's also, what I'm kind of getting from that is there's an element of kind of practicality. Like you kind of come across as somebody who's like, okay, well, theory is great, but way back in the day, the very theoretical physics, right back at the start of your career in undergraduate, less of an appeal of that. I want to apply this. I want to look at NMR. I want to actually look at people and things and liquids, and that's still kind of something that seems to be holding true right the way through your career. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think it's the pragmatic and the practical that attracts me.
Yeah, definitely.
Insofar as there are technical things and technical challenges, they are there in the service of some practical outcome that motivates it. It's not really enough for me just to investigate things for their abstract sake. It's a very applied learning, and I think it's one reason why what I've been doing is aligned very well with Newcastle. I think that's very much the Newcastle.
Yeah, and also teaching people like the new medical physicist and the radiologists and things. I mean, they are literally at the face of it, and they're diagnosing, or they're helping generate images for diagnosis and dealing with patients on a daily basis. And but who they're getting taught by is somebody who has an academic background. It's not somebody who's also doing that. I'm sure they will pick up those things when they head into the NHS labs, but it's good for them to have an academic background to that. But coming from someone like yourself, it's probably means even more. That's fantastic. So if we move from that and your research and all the questions that you've tried to answer in the past, how did you, when the restructure came about for the Faculty of Medical Sciences and these themes kind of appeared, was the IMA a fairly logical choice? From the sounds of our conversation, it seems like a very logical choice for you to go down to the methodological and application route. But was it something that you had in mind to go for, to sort of have a bigger role in? How did the kind of the role that you've got now in the IMA, how did that kind of crystallize for you?
Well, first of all, when the themes were announced, I knew I knew the IMA was going to be the best fit, because I work across many different subjects, and the methodology and application sits, extremely strongly with what I do, more strongly really than attachment to a specific disease. I have an important attachment to different research groups in the university, but it's actually the methods.
Yeah, it's very much your method going across those different groups that's the linchpin behind it. Yeah,
that's right. And so I felt more of an affiliation to sort of group together with people who are driven by the creation of new methods and applying them. And when they came about, I was asked early on just to facilitate. There was no suggestion of any leadership role at that point, but just to facilitate some of the early discussions.
Sure.
And it was really interesting to find out about the wider community of people who did innovation and methodology research in the university.
Yeah.
Whether that was people working on specific scientific equipment, or whether it was people thinking about trial design or statistics or other forms of evidence synthesis. It was really interesting and motivating to see what power the actual university had across that spectrum, much of which I've never been aware of before.
No, I totally agree with you. That's been a huge eye opener for me as well. Like joining these IMA meetings and the meetings that you and I both attend, you realize that of those people in the room, I've got an idea of, I've worked with a couple of them in the past, that I know their fields, and the guys working in pure biology or kind of pure research, my brain easily switches to understanding that. But then you've also got people coming in from the clinical trials aspect, and I have a little bit of experience with clinical trials, but at the coalface of them, not necessarily the planning and the execution. And there's a whole world of methods behind efficiently executing clinical trials. That's a whole area, and not only doing that thing, but also doing the research behind executing efficient clinical trials as well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The breadth at which it covers across the university is something that I think the IMA is quite unique in kind of bringing to the fore. So yeah, I mean, it's okay, definitely a no-brainer for joining up for the IMA. But I mean, I know we have a bit of an interior role to the IMA. We're kind of behind the scenes. But if you were to put, so I'll try and put ourselves in the brain of like an early postdoc, say postdoc number one, just out of a PhD, and they want to chase after one technique. What do you think? How do you think the IMA? How do you think we could help somebody like that get the most out of it? What kind of things do you think we can put in place? I know we've got some things in the back burner, but yeah, how do you think we could help like an early career researcher actually get interested in a specific methodology, and what can the IMA actually give somebody like that?
I think one of the most important things that's really key to someone in that position is being able to see different people as role models in looking at the different career pathways that actually exist. Because one of the problems that people have is that either they're not able to see where a particular career in X might take them, or they're not able to envisage the full spectrum of careers, and they might look at say a research professor and think, I'm not sure that's the job I want to aim for. And then if I'm not aiming for that job, what am I doing here? Yeah, line, that is where all these people are going. And so I think one of the really important things IMA can actually do is to be able to offer the contact, to be able to demonstrate there's lots of different types of career. Because as you pointed out, my academic career path couldn't be considered traditional.
No.
In any way. And I think when you look across the breadth of the IMA, and particularly when you look at, say, the people involved in PSHI, there are many different actual pathways that are going on there.
Sure.
And then again, for people like yourself working on the different specialized techniques, I think there are many opportunities there. And I think it's being open to that demonstration and showing that, yes, you don't necessarily have to be forcing yourself down this one path. Yeah. And, I was very lucky in the sense that I got involved with good labs, with good support networks very early on, and they kind of did some of that mentoring for me.
Yes.
But I think, you know, in general, it's very hard for people just to draw the energy and draw the experience that they need just from their immediate surroundings.
Yeah, I
think
think
there's a need for, you know, there's a need for kind of bigger groupings and to be exposed to alternative ways of thinking. I think that's what IMA is going to be able to bring.
And I think, yeah, that's absolutely bang on. I think the breadth of fields that we've got, and I think going across a lot of different themes and a lot of different of the institutes and all the other different faculties. I mean, especially if you consider, I know we've talked a lot about methodology today and its application. You and I are both kind of uniquely in a place to talk about that, but the I in IMA, the innovation side of things, is something that I think everybody does some sort of innovation in your day-to-day life. I mean, you'll be able to label something as innovative, but something that's come across to me fairly recently is that there are people within university in the business school and in completely different parts that you might never ever have an interaction with on a daily basis or a yearly basis or anything, and they do things and they develop new methods and innovate in an entirely different way, and we've got a lot to learn from those people as well. And I think the IMA can hopefully provide a really good resource for linking in with not just the people who are best at providing you with a piece of equipment and a technique, but also people who you might not think have anything to do with your current job or your current research, and give you a link into them and a different way to innovate, a different way to work. And who knows what that might lead to. I mean,
I think it's absolutely correct. And I think the other reason why that's so important is actually the funding landscape has changed around us. So if you look at what my supervisors were doing when I was a PhD student, then it was all based around, you know, little individual projects to individual supervisors. And now when you look at awards, very rarely are they being made to one investigator with a very specific focus. A lot of the money is being resolved for people doing things that can be taken through to application. They're for multidisciplinary teams, you know, therefore making sure that PhD students are not, you know, isolated in one area. They're for doing things in cohorts, and that means, and that means that the individual unit of a PI now needs a far bigger collaborative network to put things together.
And I think that's taking some learning for some PIs. I mean, I'm not certainly the feeling I have is that there are still people doing research that did get funding for their smaller project and did do it the old school way, if we want to call it that way, that have to learn a new way of doing things. But there are also, for as many of them as there are around, there are younger researchers coming in, and hopefully more and more every year, but who do realize that, okay, it's not just about me and what money I can get. It's a we thing, you know, what money can I get in collaboration with the person in the lab next door and the person, the university across the other side of the world. And I think, again, like to bring back to the IMA within Newcastle, you'd be very surprised, I think, if you were a young career researcher, at the number of people who do want to team up. They want, because it's better for everybody if you can team up with somebody doing something interesting with an interesting technique, and you've got an interesting idea. Your grant becomes twice as powerful as just somebody writing it all by themselves. And hopefully we can provide some of those links. I think that's a really important thing. It sounds easy to do. In reality, it's quite hard, I think, but hopefully we'll be able to put something in place.
Yeah, it is, but it's about that spending of time to try and get people to form the appropriate links, to be open-minded about forming links with others.
Yeah,
to move forward. Hopefully, I may do that.
Hopefully so. Here's hoping. So I think we'll just wrap up there, if that's all right with you, Kieren. Is there anything else you wanted to? Anything else we need to plug for the IMA? If there isn't, listeners, I'll fill you in on the. If you stay tuned, I'll fill you in on the roundup at the end. But yeah, I think all left to say is just thanks ever so much for giving up some of your time for I Am IMA podcast today. Thanks very much, Kieren, for joining us. And I'm sure if anybody needs to get in contact with you, they can have a look on our website, research.ncl.ac.uk/IMA. Our contact details are all on there. Kieren's details are all on there. I'm sure he won't mind if you've got a specific NMR or MRI question, you can reach out to him. by the way, if you do ever write an autobiography, if it's not called NMR and Me or MRI and Me, then I'll be very disappointed. It needs to have that title. All right.
Thanks very much.
No worries. Okay, well, thanks so much for joining me, Kieren. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye.